with global prices surging past the $3,500 per ounce, what does this unprecedented rally reveal about global investor confidence and fears of a potential second Cold War?
I'm delighted to join you today live from the IMF World Bank spring meetings in Washington, D.C. And apologies for the technical issues, but these are the circumstances of live connections. It's a very good question. And so clearly, we're witnessing the birth pangs of a new era. So it's like a woman who's suffering, the world economy or financial markets are like a woman in child labor Spain, right? And this is the first phase of that new Cold War pitting Beijing against Washington. And it's having a big impact on financial markets across the board. And it's having a big impact on asset classes. And gold, precious metals in general, and gold in particular, they constitute an asset class alongside currencies like the dollar, the euro, etc. And we we collectively have forgotten about that in the past 50 years because, for 50 years, the world economy very much defined by the neoliberal order, open markets, free trade, trust, confidence, etc. And now we're shifting away from that into a more volatile, more risky era marked, by a form of cynicism, which you could call, the age of geoeconomics. What does it mean, geoeconomics? It means the old frontier, the old borders separating the world of finance, the world of economics, and the world of national security, military strategy. All these nice borders are collapsing, and we're witnessing both in Washington and Beijing a convergence of national security, finance, and economics into one unified field. And in that context, there is gold, which is rising for many reasons. To make a long story short, the first reason is quantitative easings. It's the delayed, sadly for us, the delayed impact by central banks of 13, 14, 15 years of monetary complacency. So really, from Washington to London to Frankfurt, most central banks were very complacent because they printed money for 12, 13, 14 years, and they gave it a fancy name. They called it quantitative easing. We're now paying a price for that, a delayed price for too many central banks printing too much money. Another reason, more recently, is really President Trump's presence in the White House, which accelerated existing phenomena. So inflation was there long before President Trump entered the White House. Inflation started creeping in 2-3 years ago. But clearly, the fact that there's an acceleration of the new Cold War, pitting China against America, a trade war, all that is prompting big asset owners, and that would be the world's largest investors, which are a handful of pension funds, very large pension funds from Canada, the US, Australia, Holland, the UK, full of sovereign wealth funds and central banks from China, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, Singapore. These are the world's largest investors, and they are buying more and more gold. It's a very slow process. But when you have huge investors buying a little more gold every week, every month, every quarter, demand will rise steadily. Supply is fairly limited. So all that put together means that we have entered a golden era for gold.
We'll speak about turning to gold again, but let me here go to Mr. Tanis. And Mr. Tanis, amid the skyrocketing gold prices and the volatile equities, are traditional investment portfolios becoming absolute in this era of geopolitical uncertainty?
No, nice to be with you, Mona.
Thank you.
Let's put this in perspective. Gold has been a safe haven for thousands of years. They don't talk about Tesla and Apple and other stock in the Bible, they talk about gold in the Bible. So it's been around for a long time. There is no major secular change happening here. It is cyclical. When there are problems in the world, people turn to gold. Many of the problems today, as the other guest has pointed out at some length, have to do with the economic chaos started in Washington. Now, is it going to last? No, it's not going to last because President Trump sees what's doing to his ratings, and he's not going to let that happen. Look what happened in the last couple of days alone. Number one, Trump backed off his accusations against Fed Chairman Powell by saying, oh, I'm not going to fire him. Second, he said, oh, we're going to have really constructive talks with China. And you can predict he's going to suspend some of the tariffs while those talks are going on. Why is he doing this now? Because the market was collapsing, because interest rates were going up, and he can't afford to let that happen. So no, there is no major secular change happening here. It is happening because of the circumstances created by the economic chaos in Washington, and it will self-correct.
Oh, yes, indeed. We're not speaking about a secular change, but rather we're speaking about the trade-off statements and the change of statements that occurred and that changed the markets. I'll get back to you again here, Mr. Tanis, but let me go to Mr. Ferzli. And how might Trump's tariffs on China and other nations escalate into a currency war, and what implications could this have for global trade and financial stability? And how did the statements of President Trump, as respectively said Mr. Tanis, change the markets?
Great question, and I'm going to reply to your question and make a quick comment on what Mr. Tanis said earlier. So what he said about Chairman Powell and the trade war with China, these are like things which happened in the past 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, right? But gold started to rise before the tensions between, the Federal Reserve Board and the White House, and before the open trade war with China. And of course, in the past 24 hours precisely, it seems that President Trump tuned down the tensions between him and Chairman Xi Jinping in Beijing and with the Federal Reserve Board in Washington, D.C. But these are short-term fluctuations, and they will not have an impact on the price of gold if you are a long-term investor. So once again, long-term means pension funds, sovereign wealth funds from one of these 9 or 10 pension superpowers. They don't listen to what Trump or the Federal Reserve says overnight. They make 5, 10, 15 years decision. And if they have decided to allocate more to gold strategically, it is a long-term decision. Now, why? Because there are things which are bigger than just Chairman Xi Jinping in Beijing and President Trump in the White House. And what is bigger is structural phenomenon. So there are things which are going to happen anyway, whoever is in the White House. And the press, tends to blame President Trump for a lot of things, etc. A lot of things are happening regardless of who is actually the US president. And the main thing is the accelerating Chinese-American rivalry. That is going to happen if it's a Democrat, a Republican, a neoliberal, a neorealist. So the only thing which are specific to President Trump, I think, is the acceleration of the acceleration. So President Trump and his advisors, who belong to a school of thought called neorealism, they figured out that, that new Cold War with China was creeping in, that the technological, industrial, financial rivalry with Beijing was there anyway. And they said, it's there anyway. Instead of being victims of it, let's try to be actors of that change, which will happen anyway. And I think from that perspective, they're right. It's going to happen anyway. So they entered that trade war. Now, the implementation of their neoliberal program, if you will, was a bit clumsy and gave the impression that they were a little disorganized, because you don't fight a war on two fronts. So you don't declare trade war on China and at the same time on Mexico and Canada and Germany. And I think that was the mistake,